Okay, so today I'm going to be doing my LP5 videotaped interview with Jorge Gonzalez. He is a Young Life leader here in Green Bay, and I'll let him introduce himself,
Yeah,
name and pronouns, ethnic identity.
yeah. George Jorge. It's a long story that we maybe can talk about. But my name is Jorge Gonzalez, and I'm currently on staff with Young Life Green Bay here for the last 10 years, working with teens in the community.
Um, so, do you have any other work experience other than Young Life in the human services field or with the human services field?
Um, Not necessarily. Well, I when we first moved up here, my dad is a pastor now, so I help my dad develop church leadership and all those things. So kind of, yeah.
Did your family receive any human services or government services growing up?
Human services,
Mental
like
health
like
services,
food
food
stamps,
stamps.
mental health.
Yeah.
Yeah, from what I remember, we did have what was called a link card back in Illinois,
Okay.
and then I remember my mom had a WIC as
Okay.
well.
Yeah.
So yeah, yeah,
And did
we
they
did.
have good relationships with that? Good experiences with that, or?
For the most part, yes. I don't ever recall moments where they were struggling to receive
Okay.
uh, what was needed.
Okay.
And at the same time, they kind of hid that very well from
Right.
us as kids.
Okay.
So we did like I didn't even know I had a link card,
Right.
until like high school, maybe my junior year or sophomore year. Just the understanding that hey, this money's coming from
Right. An outside
yeah. Hmm.
source. So we're gonna talk a lot about immigration, which I know is a pretty sensitive topic. And so you're first generation American on your dad's side, and then your mother, were her parents born in Mexico, or how far does that go?
No, it's yeah. So I had to do some googling
Okay.
as well because it's always been kind of blurry. So I am first generation on my dad's side and second generation for my mom
Okay.
because she was born in Texas.
Okay.
And my mom, my long story, the history of my mom and what they've been through, including my dad, they only have like sixth grade education.
Okay.
So we don't know. I've always known that maybe I know we're part Cherokee because my great grandpa was Cherokee, and but as far as that, for my mom's side, it ends kind of it's
Okay.
in there. But my dad's family's from Mexico, and then yeah, so
What area of Mexico is your dad's family from?
he grew up in a Jalisco,
Okay.
so in Guadalajara.
Okay.
So
So what does it mean to you to be a first generation American, or what does that term kind of mean to you?
um, to be honest, it didn't mean anything to me growing up. At least not until maybe 2013. Um, it was one of those things that I didn't really think about,
Hmm.
or like even thinking about how I got here was like this privilege to be here.
Right.
And so 2013, it suddenly changed only because you, at the beginning, you introduced me as George and Jorge. Um, Prior to that, I was only going by George.
Oh, really?
And so now, 2013 into now, I introduce myself as Jorge.
Okay.
And so it's been a long story of cultural identity, cultural struggle, and trying to figure out how I fit in. But now I appreciate and always think what an honor it is to be first generation and how I have the opportunity to change a lot of and break a lot of cycles.
Was
So.
that term used a lot growing up, or is that more
Mm-mm.
newer?
No, I didn't really hear much about it. One because part of me, I mean, as a teenager, whatever, my 20s, whatever, didn't really care because I
Right.
didn't know
Yeah.
how much that affected me, and that. So,
Um, so what was it like to grow up with an undocumented father? Just brief picture.
um, I knew my dad was undocumented. He he was it was very quiet. We didn't talk much. That's the other part of the story is that I didn't have a relationship with my dad.
Mm-hmm.
So I knew he was undocumented. I didn't always kind of like it didn't always click that hey, if something happened, I could probably not see my dad for a long time or the rest of my life. I don't know. And so I had an absent father, but I knew he was undocumented. My uncles, same thing from my dad's side of the family, undocumented. And so that's the relationship that's how it was growing up with an undocumented father. It was like I guess stereotypically it was like the he came over here to work, find a better life. So I
Mm-hmm.
always saw him working,
Mm-hmm.
and so he was always working, and because he was always working, he was absent, and
Right.
he picked a lot of things. What it felt like he was picking material or work over relationship with us.
Do you think that has a lot to do with the fact that he was undocumented and came over here for a better life and the experiences he had growing up?
Yeah. Yes, it does. For at least for my family, because once I heard his story of how he was raised in Mexico and the things he went through, it made a lot of sense of why he was, kind of changed the perspective or the narrative of, I had a crappy dad, but now I understand why he did that. Um, and so yeah, it fits why people come over here to find that better life. And he's always
Right.
told me, I want better for you. I want better for you. And so he was showing me how to work hard and how to work hard and work hard. So yeah.
Was there a lot of guilt for you and your siblings associated with the fact that he left home to come here and that he was working so hard? Or did he ever, I guess, make you feel guilty about that or bring it up in conversation?
Uh, no, actually, he didn't. My dad was quiet. So if you've met my dad, he doesn't say much. And no, he was really good at stuffing. He was really good at just as long as I get it done, this is fine. So he never really threw that back at us. I came over to this country for a better life or anything. So I guess I'm glad I didn't get hear that enough or feel guilty. So
Do you feel like he had higher expectations for you guys because of that? Or?
I think he did, but he didn't know how to express it. And I think he was trying to show us, like I was saying, he would show us that working hard. And so I think success for him meant trying to get money, trying to get the best job, because he always wanted nice looking stuff. And even my uncles, they would. This is true story. But growing up, when I was going to my aunt's house and my uncles were around, they had this idea that I had to be like the white man, and they would always tell me that they were like, "Hey, you have to be like the white man because they have money and they have the power." And he said, "You have a working social security number and you can speak both languages." And so because of that, I I was just that affected me in the way what success should look like, um, according to like the dominant culture, and so versus just being successful and being happy and all that, and stuff. So
Regarding that kind of sense of feeling the need to be Americanized or be more of the stereotypical white American, how did that affect your feelings towards like American culture? Did that cause you to reject it later in life, or was it just something that you felt more identified with versus being a Mexican American?
no, because of what my uncles would tell me,
Mm-hmm.
I went through this huge like assimilation where because my name was whitewashed in the school system, and my mom thought it was just better for that to happen because my dad's also Jorge.
Mm-hmm.
My mom would say, "Hey, George just works fine because you're George, and then there's Jorge, my dad." And so for a long time, people knew it was that way. But yeah, it had a huge effect. where to the point where I didn't even like acknowledge that I was Mexican American. I was just American,
Right.
and I didn't want to do things the Mexican way. I wanted to do things the right way, and so yeah, it was. I tried to embody this whole stereotypical patriotic American lifestyle that I struggled with. Was really interesting because I didn't really know much about my culture until I got into high school because I grew up in a predominantly black neighborhood. So I grew up around black culture, not necessarily around my Hispanic friends, but yet my uncles were telling me, "Hey, you have to be like the white man." And I
So
was
that
like,
was confusing,
it was
I'd
complete. Yeah,
imagine.
it was
Yeah.
a huge battle and stuff like that. That was just, yeah, yeah, and so yeah, it was struggle. Yeah, but yeah,
So, you grew up in Chicago, right? And it was primarily African American neighborhood, and that was your primarily population at your schools.
yeah. So the schools I went to, I grew up in a suburb called Elgin, Illinois, and so from what I remember, it was a lot of Hispanic, black, and then there was white people that I knew. I mean, obviously, but so yeah, that's right outside Chicago. So remember East High School, but not the one here in Green Bay.
Right. Um, did you have bilingual classes as an option growing up, or?
No, no. And again, because of that, uh, I I tried so hard to look, not even look, but to act less Mexican, so that I could maybe impress people.
Could you describe, I guess, acting less Mexican or what
It
that
was
kind of?
it was just the idea of success to my uncles and to in our eyes was um, the white male, right? And so you think about the success in the history of the country, the good guys, the bad guys. It's painted. It was always a white male on top,
Right.
dominating the world. And so I tried very hard to do that. So I had to perfect, like, I even tried to not have an accent.
Was Spanish your first language?
Up until I was like 6 or 7, my mom says, I think, something like that. So I
Okay.
was really young. Then they switched over. But even to the point where I practiced really hard to not have an accent. And my accent comes out. And people tell me. And I'm like, oh, that's funny. That's cool. But I mean, but I tried really hard to not let it slip.
Right. We kind of jumped all around, so I'm off a little bit with the questions. But so you said that your dad was very, very quiet about his immigration status.
Yeah.
And that growing up, that wasn't talked about very often. Did you have an emergency plan in case of detainment or deportation?
No, that was part of, I guess back then, I hate to say it this way, like the benefit of marrying an American where he kind of like married in
Mm-hmm.
and he was able to obtain his green card that way. So
Okay.
he was undocumented, but he had his green card.
Okay.
But at any moment, obviously, anything could happen.
Right.
And so, but I know he did tell me he was working under an alias. I think it was an E&I number or something like that, where it wasn't his. And so for a long time, I didn't know his name was Salvador for a long time, and I knew, yeah. So, we didn't have an emergency plan because one, kind of didn't have to,
Right.
because if
Different
anything would happen,
time.
I was gonna be there with my mom.
Yeah, that is true. And that's, I think, a big assumption a lot of people have still today is you marry an American citizen, you get your green card, you're good to go. But it's a different journey with citizenship.
Yeah, I feel like it's a lot harder today. Even with my dad's process of becoming a citizen, which he just became 5, 6 years ago, it was a huge, long journey. He's now like 55, 56. He came over here when he was like 15 years old. So just think about that. That's, I don't know, 40 years maybe
Yeah.
being here, and he just got his thing. And then, from what I've heard, even right now, it feels like it's even harder to do so. So.
How long was that process from application to?
See, that's the thing with my dad. He, up until the day he told, I think this journey for him was for him.
Mm-hmm.
So he kept it low key, And so I didn't really know he was getting his citizen
Okay.
until the day he goes, "Hey, I'm gonna go take my test for the citizenship
Oh,
or
okay.
for my citizenship." Like we were like, "Wait, what?" And so it was like a surprise to all of us, and
Yeah.
we are like proud of him and all this stuff. And once he did that, it was really cool. He's like the oldest of his whole family, and he's got an older sister, but they've always seen him as like the oldest.
Mhm.
Uh, but after he did it, then all my other uncles and aunts followed suit.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's cool. He started the
Little trend, domino
Yeah.
effect.
yeah. So what were his feelings upon becoming a citizen? Was he excited? Did he feel any guilt towards being an American citizen? Because I know with some people feel that kind of longing to be home once they make that final jump into being a citizen. Um,
So like, what was he like when he became citizen? Like, or
I guess
what do
kind
you
of
mean,
like what were there any underlying feelings of guilt regarding the citizenship, or was it
Oh, I
just a
see.
joyous,
No, he
good
was happy.
experience?
There's a picture he sent of us. It's the only time I really, one of the only times I've ever seen him really smile.
I think
He
I've
was
seen
proud,
that picture.
right?
Yeah.
He's standing next to the judge or whoever
Mhm.
writes on the stuff. Big smile. Um, but no, I don't think there was any sense of guilt of losing. I think he had been waiting this for a long time, and it finally happened.
Do you know any of your aunts or uncles that had that feeling, or was it just overall?
No, I just remember they probably had the same feeling. I just remember them calling my dad
Mm-hmm.
one by one. Hey,
Excited.
I get to go back to Mexico and come back and not be
Mhm.
afraid.
How was that for him to be able to go home and be able to see family and not be worried about?
It was really cool. I know a couple years ago he went down to Mexico for the first time since leaving, and so I think it had been so long since he's been to his childhood home,
Mm-hmm.
and it was his first time. Um, I wasn't able to be there with him, but uh, he was. I think he was just happy to be able to go back without the fear of never coming back.
Right.
So.
Yeah. Did he continue a relationship with his family in Mexico after coming here, or was it hard to keep that tie?
Well, actually, the majority of his family ended up moving
Okay.
to Illinois.
Okay.
So there's a lot of family. All his brothers and sisters are over here. All of his aunt and uncles, I think, the majority of them and cousins are in Chicago. And so I think the majority of them were over here, as far as I know.
Okay.
So
Did you have a relationship with any family in Mexico growing up, or?
no, I
Not
didn't.
so
I didn't
much.
see a lot of them. Yeah, we would see them at big family gatherings, and it felt like I've always known them. But other than that, just some of my cousins that I grew up with in the area in Elgin.
Mhm.
So pause.
Um, so growing up with Spanish as your first language at home, um, were your parents, did they have a strong English speaking ability, or did you have to translate for them ever growing up?
Yeah, I translated for my dad a few times. English. I mean, even I think after a while, my Spanish fell off mainly because of the whole assimilation thing, but it came back. So I got a lot of practice done because of my dad from time to time. But I think one of the things I'm proud of my dad is that he worked really hard to. I don't think it was a pride thing, but it was more of like, hey, I can do this.
Mm-hmm.
So there's many and plenty times where he went to the store by himself because he could do this,
Mm-hmm.
and he just did it. And so, yeah.
Did your mom ever talk about any feelings of anxiety because their ability to speak English wasn't as good, or feeling anxiety over needing things to be translated?
No, because my dad had my mom. My mom
Mm-hmm.
had my dad. Because my mom's Hispanic. Again, I don't know what kind, but so my mom understands Spanish, but she grew up speaking more English.
Mm-hmm.
So my dad, so I don't even know how that worked when they were dating, but because all my dad spoke was Spanish, and so they had each other,
Mm-hmm.
and so they never really expressed that maybe to each other. Yeah.
Did you ever feel any sort of like anxiety or need to be adultified when translating for them or taking on their problems because of translation, or was that not something you had to do with more intense documents, I guess?
Yeah, I didn't have to do that much, mainly because my mom was always there, and because I was disconnected from my dad.
Right.
He never asked me for anything,
Okay.
and I never cared enough to ask, "Hey, do you need help?"
Um, so growing up in a majority African American Black area, did you ever feel alienated because you were Mexican, or was that not something that was ever made super, I guess, apparent to you in classes or with your peers?
No, it was made more apparent when I was in high school, and I was trying to like, well, I had Hispanic friends,
Mm-hmm.
but there was always from time to time like the jokes of, "Hey, go hang out, insert racial slur,"
Mm-hmm.
because of my black friends that I hang out with, right? And so, and a lot of times, my Hispanic friends are just like, "Oh, you just want to be black. You're just trying to act black," and I'm like, I don't know what any of that means, but I just understood what I did because I did it, and mainly because of probably my environment. But yeah, mostly I got that from my Hispanic friends from time
Yeah.
to time, and yeah.
You get that from any family members and stuff too, or was it?
No, the only thing that I heard from time to time was, yeah, it's just more like our biases as a culture sometimes, and I think it still exists today, is the fact that they would say, my family would overhear them as like, if you marry black, you marry down,
Mm-hmm.
but if you marry white, you marry up. And so there was this kind of like idea of like, if you want to be successful, you got to marry the right kind.
Yeah, what is it? Mejorar la raza?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Better
and
the
so,
people.
like for me, for example, my wife is white,
Mm-hmm.
but I know for a fact if my grandma was still around, she'd probably be proud of that,
Mm-hmm.
that I married white. Or, yeah, if I married a Hispanic woman, she would have been like, that's great too.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah.
So within your family and within Mexican culture, there's a lot of different biases. Would you, I guess, want to talk a little bit about that, or go
Yeah,
over
yeah.
maybe some of the racial, I guess, what can it, gender biases?
Yeah, there's like the machismo
Mm-hmm.
that we've dealt with, where with my wife, she white, grew up in the suburban in Milwaukee, uh, but it was a lot of culture shock for her, and
Mm-hmm.
trying to understand and learn of like, for example, like, when you walk into like a party or something, the woman has to give you,
Mm-hmm.
you sit down, the woman serves you your plate, right? That's like one of the things I grew up watching, and I remember telling her, "It's like, you don't have to do that."
Mm-hmm.
She goes, "I feel like I have to." It's like, you don't have to do that. So then I would get up and serve my own plate, and so like things like that. Um,
Did your family ever say anything about that, or
no,
were
no.
they?
By then, when I met my wife when I was like 28, maybe, I don't know. She was a
How long
leader
have
when
you
you were
guys been
around.
married? Yeah,
5 years.
she was.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
been a while. We knew each other for a long time. My parents knew of her, but by then, my family, we've grown so much out
Mm-hmm.
of um, the whole, machismo, or that kind of mentality of, you have to, you know. Yeah, the other biases that I think my dad was, for a while we argued for, was because if I didn't have like an intense labor or work,
Okay.
then I wasn't really working,
Mm.
or I wasn't a man enough,
Mm-hmm.
right? So if I'm not coming home extremely tired because I just worked 12 hours, am I really working? And it
Right.
was what the definition of a man, at least for my family, was: you work hard, you make
Mm-hmm.
money, take care of your family, and you don't cry.
Mm.
And so that was another, I guess, bias.
Yeah. Or
I guess. I mean,
expectation.
I guess it's all around, right? The culture
Mhm.
of like men don't cry type thing. But
Right.
like I heard my tias would say from time to time to my cousins, if you don't stop crying, I'm gonna buy you a skirt
Mm. Mhm.
because I'm
You're
not
acting
supposed to
like a
cry.
girl. Yeah.
And so yeah, that was kind of drilled in us a
Okay.
lot.
How do you think that affected you, I guess, going into adulthood and learning how to regulate your emotions and deal with the expectations of adulthood and society?
Um, it affected me a ton, only because I was, as you heard me saying, I was talking like my whole cultural identity was already in a mess,
Mhm.
and then like the expectations, like I don't know what the expectations were for me growing up, and so I kind of, so I self sabotaged a lot because of it, and so it was a journey, and so about that's when I was saying about 2013 is when a lot changed,
Mhm.
is when I started really. Okay. Long story short, I got tired of being this angry because suppress. No relationship with my dad. Um, I'm like, am I supposed to be white? Am I supposed to be black? Am I supposed to be Hispanic? Where do I fit in this world? And so, like, it was like a boiling point. Um, where a few points, it was, the dark side of it, whereas I was wanting to, like, end my life because I didn't know what the heck I was supposed to look like or be. And so that did affect me a lot. Um, but yeah, 2013, it was one of those moments where I was like, let's start. I want to embrace who I am, and so I'm a person of faith,
Mhm.
and so this idea of being created in His image really, really um, stuck with me. Like, what does that mean? And so I went on this journey of embracing who He created me to be, and who God created me to be for this life. And so instead of ending it, I decided to just pursue this whole like inner journey or self development. I learned to embrace my skin color. I learned to embrace who I was created to be, to the point where I even say it's an honor to be uh, born here, Mexican American, from a dad who came over here undocumented. And so that long journey has really, really, really helped me um, break a lot of and even expand, not even expand my biases, but to see the world differently and how I lead myself and my family has nothing to do because I grew up Mexican anymore,
Mm.
but everything to do with my success as far as being able to love who I was created to be. And so 2013 is when I forgave my dad. We kind of, redeemed that relationship, but also I hugged myself in the sense of thanks for being who you are. And that's when I decided to make the name change to Jorge.
Um, so do you prefer Jorge over George or
Yes, I have a
okay.
lot of okay. So that's what a lot of people are like, dude. Are you Jorge? Are you George? All my friends in the Chicagoland area, they call me George. Or anyone before 2013,
Calls you George.
I say like this: anyone before 2013 is allowed to call me George,
Mm.
because they don't know the journey I've been through.
Mm.
Ever since I moved, it's been like 15 years or something like that. But before 2013 and forward, I say you have to call me Jorge.
I was introduced to you, I think, as Jorge, but through young
Everyone, there's
life
a
and
lot of kids
everything,
that know
there's
me. Yeah,
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 a lot of intermixing between
yeah.
the two
So
names. But
that was fun.
yeah, so that shift to, I guess, identifying with yourself versus what you were taught or
Hmm.
what society expected for you, that I a lot of self-reflection. Did you receive any sort of mental health services or any outside help during that time, or was it mostly just self-reflection and reconnecting yourself with family?
No, yeah, no. It all started first with the whole, I confronted my dad, confronted my mom, my brothers and sisters. They're like, hey, it was a crappy brother, crappy son, all that good stuff. And then that was partial. That was part of the process. And then over the last 3 years or so, I have really, really, because once I got married, I realized like, even though I'm breaking a lot of stuff, there's still a lot of things that I was bringing in because I learned from my dad or my mom. Um, the culture they created now within the Gonzalez family, I was bringing into this new family, this new life of mine, and I was like, this is not healthy. And because I noticed it and I picked up on it, me and my wife, we started working on it. Because we both, same thing, we both had some things. Obviously, one, she's white, I'm Hispanic. Families are completely different. Her family plans years ahead.
Mm-hmm.
My family says, hey, tonight we're going to eat. Let's come together. And it's like, doesn't always work well for us, right? And so we're learning how to build our culture with our family. And so, yes, the way to do that is I've been able to talk to her. We've been able to go to counseling. And then myself, personally, go see another counseling. So I have my faith, but on top of that, I have the people that I can talk to. And on top of that, I have my personal counseling that I see.
Was there any, I guess, stigma for you personally and in your family with seeking counseling or seeking outside resources?
I think back then, because again, the culture, at least when the culture I grew up on mental health was like, you're not really depressed, you're just being lazy, right? You're not really depressed, you need to go eat some food. You're not depressed, you just need to, I don't know, whatever it is. So depression was non-existent.
Right.
So I think back then it was one of those, like, yeah, you don't need help, you're just suck it up. Man up is what, the whole thing, right? Man up. So for a while, I think back then, I think it would have been like, look at this crazy guy, it's the local, right? But today, my mom actually was the first one, I think, to do, oh no, my sister was the first one to seek a counselor.
Is she Sylvia's older or younger?
She's younger.
Younger than you?
Yeah,
You're the oldest,
I'm
right?
the oldest of 4.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And so I know for sure my mom and my dad have sought counseling, myself and then my sister.
That's cool that overall your family has had a pretty, I guess, accepting journey with mental health services. I guess we talked a lot about your family's culture, but what ways did the media and, like, I guess, mass culture's stereotypes and representation of Mexicans and Mexican men, how did that affect the way you saw yourself?
I guess in, like, stereotypes, when you talk about stereotypes in, like, movies or media, I don't think it's a stereotype, but I really believe our people are really hardworking. I've witnessed that throughout growing up until now. The kids that I get to serve and seeing their families always working, that's pretty accurate to what I've seen on shows and stuff. The other thing too is, like, not all Mexicans are gangsters. So when you watch all these movies, Hispanics are usually the gangbangers, right? Or the cholos and the Chicanos, not Chicanos, the cholos. And so, but yeah, as of lately, it's the most common misconception is that Hispanics don't contribute anything to this country. It's when they come here undocumented, and that they don't contribute taxes or anything like that. I think that's one of the biggest misconceptions today, is that what the media is saying about my people and the people that are coming over here undocumented, is that, like, no, they're paying a lot and taxes and doing a ton of stuff. That's probably the biggest thing I've seen is the media, is the whole, like, undocumented people are not contributing.
Right, and in the political narrative of today, I guess we see a lot of negative stereotypes, even just language regarding the citizenship process and the documentation process. Have your parents ever talked about how that's had an effect on them, or has that had any effect on you being the son of a father who is undocumented?
The only way that's affected me is, and it's kind of like it's not directly from my parents, but it's from people who have made certain comments about undocumented people. Just like the hurtful you said, the negative um, narrative that's being painted out there, to the point where it's kind of affected me. Like, oh, like you said that, but you're talking about my dad, and if my dad wouldn't have come over here, you and I would have not been friends.
Yeah.
And so that's one way that it's affected me when people are talking and talking and talking blah blah blah, and like you do realize that I come from someone who's
Right.
undocumented, right?
Yeah.
And so, and you talk about this is just from people I've talked with, and like you talk about, oh, Jorge's great, he's done this, boom, 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 whatever, whatever. He's like, none of that exists if my dad doesn't come over here.
Right. There's
Right?
no this without
There's no
what
this
he
without
went
he
through.
went through. And so that's probably the one way it's affected me the most is the whole like kind of third party way of
Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective to have as we wouldn't have, I guess, a lot of the people that have added to the society and a lot of people in general without that process, and that's not something that's ever really talked about.
Yeah.
Just in news and anywhere. Um, so we talked a lot about you being caught between, I guess, all three cultures, African American, um, Mexican, and white American. What is your definition of Mexican American? Because I know it's different for everybody, but
It's just funny. Me and my wife were having this conversation. It was like, do you label yourself a Mexican American, even if you were born in Mexico? I was like, yeah, because I mean, it's part of who I am. It's part of where my dad comes from, right? Because we're talking about our daughters now who are Mexican white, right? So yeah, I think I wouldn't know how to define like a Mexican American. I just, at least for myself, I define it because my dad is from Mexico, and so that's something I've just taken on. I'm like, this is the right thing to do.
a good identifying term, I guess.
Yeah, yeah.
I want to check out your own time. So working with, you work with a large population of kids, ages middle and high school primarily, a little bit of college, a little adults. What is the primary group you work with? Would you say it's primarily white, with the Pier and Bayport clubs as well?
No, it's been the most multi-ethnic
Okay.
that we've seen past like maybe 5 years or so. It's been the most multicultural, multi-ethnic, socioeconomically diverse group of kids that we've ever seen.
Yeah, very diverse.
So it's been really, really cool to see. I think before, maybe like, I don't know, 5, 6 years ago, even when I first started at Young Life, you would say like, your Bayport Club for Young Life was predominantly white, and then what we call downtown now would be predominantly black. And so, yeah.
Yeah, because I think when I started, downtown was very Hispanic, black population. And I know just a lot has changed now. Do you see, I guess, what sort of interactions do you see with the Hispanic and Latino students and the leaders outside of their race, students outside of their race? Just any sort of conflicts, things that are approached, I guess not in the best way, from a staff aspect.
Like kids of color with
White staff and white students, I guess.
Yeah, at first we've gotten some new leaders in our clubs that are at least downtown where it's pretty diverse. Leaders who come from like never really been around, right? And so the cool thing is with us, we always train our leaders as we should, but then we also do a CQ training, cultural intelligence training, of just for them to understand who we're working for and why we're working for them. And so we try to change because everyone comes with their biases, no matter where you're at and what room you're entering. We all have our biases, and so what we have done is we've created a training where we're like, here, try this lens on
Mhm.
for a moment in your life where it's not all about you
Right.
and how you grew up and your values and your traditions and your culture. So this fits anyone, white, black, brown, woman,
Mhm.
anyone coming into the room, and just say this is the goal, this is the mission. And so we our best, yeah. And so we train our leaders so when they walk into a room, it's not like, oh, there's black kids, there's brown kids, and but the cool thing is with Young Life, we because we're about building relationships, we're about reaching kids. The cool thing is that yes, you do see the standoff,
Mhm.
especially with some of our black kids when it comes to white leaders. Are like, oh, I don't know if I need to write from you,
Mhm.
right? And so it's important for like our leaders mostly to keep showing up, to be genuinely interested in saying, hey, let me call you by name. Like, hey, Anna,
Mhm.
let's just get to know each other. And then slowly, little by little, those barriers are broken.
Mhm.
And you begin to see a trust build with the student and the leader. Where, like, for example, now we have kids, we're like, yeah, we'll go with this guy. Like, there's
Mhm.
no issues with this guy. And we have like 5, 6 kids. Like, they don't want to come with me, they want to go with him, which is really cool to see.
Mhm.
And this is, at least for these leaders, it's only been maybe a year or so of them working with these
Okay,
students.
cool.
And so,
So the cultural intelligence training, what does that really incorporate, exercise wise, or what does that look like?
um, we approach it from the because we are faith based. You can do it either way, with faith based organization or just corporate. But in the faith base is kind of going back to what I was saying is when you're created in God's image. If we can walk into a room and understand that everyone's created in God's image, um, it changes everything. Versus me walking into a room and saying I'm Mexican, and like that's part of who I am. Because for me at least, it's like I said before, it's a gift to be. For me, it's a gift to be Hispanic, and because I embrace myself that way, I can embrace other people's cultures. But that's only when I take a step back from my own pride, my own ego, my own traditions. Not that they're wrong. It's just now that I've taken a step back, it's given me room to hear your story, to hear your culture, to hear your traditions, to hear. Because not every Hispanic's the same, right? Not every
Mhm.
Mexican is the same person. Not every white person is the exact same people, um, and et cetera, right? And so the training is meant to help the leader again try on different lenses. I learned this from my friend who says he's a photographer and he says like got different lenses to take pictures, right? If you
Mhm.
always take pictures um, like in the same mode, like you're not really going to capture much,
Right.
right? And the reason why they have all these lenses is because you can capture more of the bigger picture, or you can get like very um,
Zoomed in.
zoomed in, or static, whatever it is, terms that they use for taking pictures. And so when we're able to do that, take off this lens, put this lens on, and when you understand when to do that, it it changes a lot. It changes everything about how we see people in general, whether you're a believer in Jesus or not a believer in Jesus. When we see people as human, we can walk into a room and have a conversation without trying to destroy each other
Right.
based on our different opinions.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's focusing. Something that was said in this class was focusing on, the humanity rather
Mm-hmm.
than the big picture, and I think that guess that's a good way to take the whole faith aspect out of it. But
Yeah.
yeah, no. What I guess assumptions do you see people, coming in with when working with Hispanic, the Hispanic population, and working with Hispanic youth?
Uh, for the most part, kids, the assumptions are like, oh, every kid, even it's not just like mostly Hispanic, but it's like Hispanic and black kids, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, oh, they're the poor kids,
Mm-hmm.
and so I need to help the poor kids, right? And so we've seen that um, more of like assumptions of, oh, your parents must be here undocumented,
Mm.
just automatically assuming. Um, yeah, this idea of like, if you're, I've heard comedians say it a lot, where it's like, there's this comedian who talks about how he doesn't like the assumption that that people think that every Mexican is hardworking,
Mm.
and he kind of makes it a joke because I'm not hardworking,
Mm-hmm.
right? And he's making a joke, so that's funny. This idea that we don't, and hardworking means like, in my head, I'm just thinking of like hard labor kind of
Right,
work, right?
physical labor jobs.
And so there's that idea of like, oh, your
Mm-hmm.
people are hardworking, so you should be able to X, Y, Z. But yeah, as far as assumptions, that's probably the most common one I've seen,
Mm-hmm.
at least with when I'm working with the students that I work with.
Um, oh, where are we? I guess like what mistakes have you seen when in resources that reach out to the Hispanic Latino community and um, people outside of the Hispanic Latino community working with that population?
What mistakes have I seen?
Yeah, I guess kind of what, I don't want to say like what's the bad side that you've seen, but
Mhm.
I guess yeah, what mistakes have you seen?
Mistakes is like from the system side, or like from like me, the user, or receiving.
I guess a little bit of both, kind of. I guess systematically, what gaps do you see in reaching out to the Hispanic Latino communities?
I don't know if I've seen. I just know from my experience, my the only thing I've seen that I believe in, not everyone might agree with this, but with the whole like the food stamps and
Mm-hmm.
the Medicare and stuff like that, my parents used it, and I remember they would say things like, "We're using this for now, but we're
Mm-hmm.
not meant to stay here,"
Mm-hmm.
right? And so I think for me at least, my goal in life was like, all right, this was great. I'm grateful for this,
Mm-hmm.
but I can't stay stuck here. And so now that all my brothers and sisters, we've broken that cycle, that mentality of like the need, because there are actual people that really need it,
Mm-hmm.
and I believe that there are people out there that are very capable
Mm-hmm.
of breaking that
Mm-hmm.
and giving themselves a life that is way better than settling for, not way better,
Right.
but settling for that. And so at least that's what I grew up personally. And so I know that's not probably always the most popular
Mm-hmm.
response, but like I believe in my people. Like I
Right.
love my people. Like I want to see better for all of our people.
Mm-hmm.
And so and that, I think that's why I say that is because I've seen so many people just stay stuck um, there, when I know the capacity they have to be um, successful people in the sense of like, let's break the cycle of this.
Right.
So
Right. Because I mean, there's nothing wrong with receiving those
correct,
services,
correct.
but it's not something that you want to become dependent
Mm-hmm.
on. Dependent on the
Yeah.
system, I think, is the problem with that there. But I guess what do you think would get families out of that mindset and get people out of that mindset, or what work needs to be done there?
That's where it's like, that's where I hit a wall too, just because it's so, I can't go change people's mind,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then I guess, one of the things that is fearful for a lot of undocumented people is, um, this is good enough right now because I don't know. It's just, I've seen it with friends of, yeah, like there's almost like a fear driven sometimes. I mean, again, this is all my experience. This is not everyone's experience, and every Hispanic, every Mexican
Mm-hmm.
undocumented family. And so there was this fear based, like, okay,
How has I guess the attitude in the human services field and in um, just our society in general changed towards the Hispanic and Latino population recently? Like past, I guess,
how
10 years.
how's it changed, like, as far as
I guess what have you noticed that as a culture, we have changed. Have we changed the way that we view the Hispanic and Latino population? Is it more positive, more negative?
I think more parents are coming around from what I've seen, from what I've heard. It's it's scary walking into the unknown, which my parents did, as far as like the mental health stuff
Mm-hmm.
and moving on. Not moving on, but like working hard to to be able to provide enough to not rely like on stuff like that. And I don't know. Again, it's just like some of the things I've seen on TikTok, some of the Hispanic people I follow, and how they tell their story, and how there are more and more and more like millennials who are confronting their parents.
Mm-hmm.
Like, hey, I loved you, this type of thing. Let's heal from this. I've seen more and more of that, headed in the right direction. And so, I mean, I'm scrolling on TikTok and I'll see a video and I'll start crying because I can relate.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's like father son, they've never really talked type thing, and so I've seen. I think it's improving. I think from at least what I have felt, even like with my dad. My dad's a pastor again, like I was saying, but even the things that I've heard him talk about. So I'll ask him once in a while, hey, what are you talking about? Church today. I'm just curious, and he'll tell me, and I was like, hey, that's different. Whether that's like on relationships or whether that's on mental health or the need that it's okay to ask for help.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing wrong with asking for
Right.
help. Hence, that's why you also have like food stamps and
Right.
Medicare and stuff. Like, there should be no shame in asking for
Mm-hmm.
help. And so, at least I'll say it like this: if I see my dad changing, then there's definitely more people changing
Yeah.
in the right direction,
That's-
positively. Yeah.
So I guess in starting that conversation and making that change in whether it's relationship with your parents or
Mhm.
whoever in your family, I guess what advice or what kind of words of wisdom would you give people that are hoping to make that reconnection and hoping to break that cycle? Because it's hard.
Yeah, and it's been what's 2013 till now. Like, is that
10 years.
almost 10 years?
That's
Oh yeah, it is
11
like 10
years.
years. It's
That's
20
11
yeah.
years.
So that's how long it's been
Mm-hmm.
that I've had to put the work in
Mm-hmm.
personally, for myself. And I don't want to sound very like cliche or anything like that, but it really does start with you.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how much do you want to change? How much do you want to see of a change? Like, it starts with you. As much as I wanted my dad to change, like when I met with my dad to do the whole like, hey, I just need to forgive my dad, I just need to confront my dad and speak these emotions, blah blah blah, all that good stuff. I was doing it for myself. I was doing it regardless if he was going to respond in a good way or in a bad way. It was for me. It wasn't for my
Right.
dad because I needed it. And so his response back to me ended up being more than I expected.
Mm-hmm.
So we cried and we laughed. We loved each other, but it changed. It changed everything. And so since 2013, I have been working, slowly on myself in the whole process of, okay, what things I need to work on.
Mm-hmm.
And not being ashamed to ask for help.
Right.
Like, it's okay that I don't fit the mold of what even a Mexican would define me as, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so being okay with that.
Mm-hmm.
And just embracing who I am, why I'm here. Even checking myself even checking the privilege that I have.
Mm-hmm.
As a Mexican American, like, there is a level of privilege that I have, and a level of responsibility that I have to help my brothers and sisters, whether it's through faith, whether it's through finding work or anything like that, or just moving to the whatever the next big thing is, right? I feel like I'm privileged in that sense that I can walk into rooms that they can't. Like, how do I speak
Right.
for them when I can't? And the only reason I can do that now and really advocate is because I've been able to understand me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've placed myself in the middle. People always try to figure me out of like, oh, where do you stand politically? Where do you stand on your faith? Blah, 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 and all this stuff. And I'm in the middle because it's the best place to learn because it's kind of like you're being pulled, trying to be pulled to both sides. And I've learned so much from both sides of whatever it is we're trying to talk about.
Yeah, trying to find that middle neutral walking ground.
Yeah, and so that's been the easiest. So I would say, I would say start there. Go find someone to talk to, and then maybe one day you'll come. Or I would even say this was a game changer too for me, was ask your parents what their story is. Asking my dad what his story was a game changer as far as like, now I understand why you were the dad as I was growing up, because I thought you just hated me. But I never knew that until he told me his story. And when he told me his story, I was like, okay, cool. And now I understand you better.
Right.
And now I know, it sounds funny, but now I know how to love you.
Yeah. It started to make sense, I guess. And with, I guess, hearing your parents' stories as an adult, how did that impact you, I guess, in that moment? Like, what were the feelings around, I guess, unpacking everything that they went through?
Like my parents, how did they feel?
How did you feel about what they shared?
Oh, it was pretty cool. I think it was powerful in the sense of like, it almost felt like they were breaking their cycle of whatever it is, trauma they were going through, and so again, just because we learn a lot from our parents, right? You see what they do, and you can either pick it up or whatever. Because I saw my parents do that, and I was like, I want to do that. And so it's really encouraging for me to see like, oh, they're really vulnerable. They're really real about their feelings, their emotions. So maybe I can do that too.
Did they struggle with that vulnerability and being vulnerable to you as their child?
Yes and no. My dad was. My dad was always shut off. He was not much emotions. My mom, she hid what needed to be hidden, and only showed what needed to be shown. So, from time to time, there was,
What's your prep for time? Because we covered all my written questions.
And there's a lot of gap in there, so you have to cut it off.
I know.
We could probably do that quick.
Is there anything that you want to talk about?
Well, how much time we have? Oh, remember we stopped it too? Did you start it when we started back up?
No, I didn't pay attention to that. We probably got like a while to go.
So this is 40 minutes.